Kevin's going to discuss the imperative and the opportunity for companies to elevate their mission by advancing humanity. Humanity, as it turns out, is advanced one human at a time, starting with yourself and then the person right next to you. So Kevin's going to share the details that have helped helped Hancock Lumber be a best place to work for 9 years in a row now. 9 consecutive years. And you'll learn how the power of shared leadership drives deep employee engagement and creates genuine separation between you and your competition. So please join me in, and the song that played before, while we were all kind of getting you guys settled, Change the World, that's Kevin, essentially. So he's not just in this to sell sticks, he's in here, you'll hear in his message, to change the world. So let's welcome Kevin to the stage.
Good to see you. So I got here last night a bit late, all excited to talk about a new approach to leadership. And my leadership last night was quite poor. I started out by going to the wrong hotel. I tried to check in last night to the Hyatt in downtown Denver, which is, yes. So for everything I'm going to say this morning, follow me at your own peril. We're really probably all day going to talk about change. And it's a subject that's really under-considered, understudied, under-discussed. I've thought a lot about it because it's the essence of leadership. How does change happen? How is change engineered? If we could figure out the answer to that question, we could apply it to every single topic in our work and our lives that interested us. I've concluded that change happens in a very simple way. If you can picture 3 concentric circles and write a single word within each one. Within, beside, and beyond. Within, beside, and beyond. I've found in my own life that change only really ever happens when I change. And when I change, I then become something different for the people right beside me. And their world changes. And if that change is good and that change is consistent, that will ripple to the 3rd circle, which is beyond. I think of Gandhi's iconic quote, become the change you wish to see. Become the change you wish to see. Leadership. What's the origin of our current leadership model? Have you thought about that? Like, where did it come from? How old is it? We're going to talk about this morning, but I'll give you a clue, and you know this. It's a really old model. It's thousands of years old. And the world has changed considerably since that model, was invented. And so has leadership really kept up? And is it time for leadership to become something different? That's what we're going to explore this morning. But I want to start with this. Today's my mom's birthday. She is 77. I love my mom. She's an amazing person. We've been business partners since 1997 when my father died, and I don't think I've missed one of her birthdays since then. So I went to her. I said, Mom, I can't come to your birthday. She said, why not? I said, I've got to go to Denver. She said, Denver? What are you doing in Denver? I said, I'm going to give a talk. So this is when my mom's competitive spirit kicked in. She totally shifted gears. She stood up straight and she pointed right at me. She said, well then, make sure you give a good one. I said, okay, Mom, I'll try to give a good one. And then she said, remember what Mark Twain said? I said, tell me, Mom, what did Mark Twain say? Mark Twain said if he had more time to prepare, he would have given a shorter talk. I just came here from Naples, Florida. We live in Maine, but we're lucky enough to have a house in Naples, and that house took on 5 inches of ocean water, but we fared so much better than so many people. The destruction down there is until you've seen it, it's crazy. But something while I was there struck me, and it ties to what I want to talk about this morning. Everywhere I went for 5 days in Naples, there were people helping people, neighbors helping neighbors, strangers helping strangers. The official support systems are all overwhelmed, so it defaults to individuals. And everywhere you turned, people were helping each other. Which makes me think of my favorite book of the year, and it's not actually mine. It's a book called Humankind. Have you seen it? If you haven't, you might check it out. It's by Rutger Bregman. He's a Swede, I believe, or a Finn, Scandinavian. And the premise of his book is super simple, yet exceptionally powerful. People, it turns out, are almost always good. A very different truth than what we see on television. And he demonstrates in his book that the more dire the circumstance, the more good people become. The worse it gets, the better humanity acts and performs. That assumption, people are good, or its alternative, people are not to be trusted, determines everything about what happens next with respect to how one would approach management. If you believed people were almost always good, how would you lead? How would you manage? How would you empower? And if you believed alternatively that left to their own devices, people were self-interested, people were devious, people were not to be trusted, how would you lead? How would you manage? That's the subject I want to explore this morning. I brought 24 slides, and when I thought about what my mom said, I cut it down to 2. So you're going to be looking at this slide for a long time. We're just going to let it linger. Let's talk about the possibility of elevating the highest mission or purpose of work. I think at its highest level, every corporation on earth should share the same mission, and that is to advance humanity. Thank you. So then we have to consider how humanity was advanced, and I've concluded upon consideration and reflection that it's advanced one human at a time, starting with the people right beside you. It's actually a local job. It's an inside job. And how might we advance humanity at work? Well, I think we might do it by making work deeply meaningful for the people who are engaged in it. So how might we make work deeply meaningful for the people who are engaged in it? It's actually super simple. We might make it deeply meaningful by dispersing the power, pushing it out, sharing the leadership, and making it safe for everyone to be their authentic self and speak with their authentic voice. Which really comes down to putting more love in the place of work. In May of 2017, I got in my car in Casco and drove to the dilapidated Dunkin' Donuts Center in Providence, Rhode Island, to watch the last ever performance of the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus. I thought it was a significantly underreported historical event. This was the entertainment dynasty of America for a century and a half, and I was witnessing its final show. There were no elephants at that final show. Those elephants had been pulled from the circus 1 year earlier over concerns for their experience. Think about how humanity had changed. What was life like in the circus for the elephant in the circus? And regardless of how you feel about that, that's not the point. Here is the point. The well-being of 11 individual elephants had trumped the importance of an entire iconic industry. The well-being of the individual was taking precedence over the well-being of the empire, in this case, the circus. That event to me was highly representative, indicative, a clue of what's unfolding across humanity. There's a power shift that's wanting to unfold, and it's global. And that power shift might be summed up this way. The old historic model was power to the center. The empire came first. The individual across centuries was indoctrinated into the art of making oneself subservient to the whole. The old model was empire-centric. The new model that's wanting to unfold is individual-centric. And it's rooted in a really beautiful concept. Everybody is king. We were taught that only a few could be king. The entire leadership model of the past is based on the belief that only a few get to be king. The truth is, everybody is king. In the old model, let's bring that into the place of work. In the old model, the employee existed to serve the company. It was taught for many decades the employee was a disposable, dispensable asset, like inventory and receivables and fleets and equipment. And that asset served the company. The new model that I want to talk about this morning is that the company exists, one in which the company exists to serve the people who work there. And if the company could become exceptional at serving the people who work there, that company might then soar to unprecedented heights on the wings of thriving humans at work. Whether or not you believe that could be pulled off, that's a cool idea. Imagine if it could be pulled off. I went about 3 weeks ago on an elk hunt in the northeast corner of Wyoming. I've been elk hunting maybe a dozen times, had 11 amazing experiences, and then the one I had 3 weeks ago. The guide, I will not name his name, was one of the most controlling, dictatorial, domineering individuals I'd ever worked with, say nothing about hired. I was his customer. His only interest was filling a tag. You know what that means? Having his client shoot an elk and tagging out so that on his website he could put another picture of another elk and show his success rate. His actual interest level in me or my experience was literally zero. By day 3, I laughed so hard when it happened, I began rooting for the elk. I'm the hunter. I've got the gun. I've paid the money. I'm the one lying in the cold in the dark, and I hear the elk bugling, and I'm rooting for him not to come out. I was rooting for the elk. That's where I am today in the American workplace. Even though I'm a CEO and I'm a business owner, I'm rooting for the employees of this company and this planet to create the change they're seeking. I'm rooting for a more employee-centric work experience. I'm rooting for better jobs. I'm rooting for better culture. I'm rooting for higher pay. I'm rooting for better work schedules. I'm rooting for more trust. Everything thereafter, I'm rooting for. Let's think about, having said that, humanity. Work is a subset of humanity. Let's back up and ponder this question. How's it going? How's humanity doing? How's humanity doing? Has anybody ever heard of Drake's equation? Are there any astrophysicists in the room? Drake's equation is a 7-digit, highly sophisticated formula for measuring or estimating the number of intelligent civilizations in the Milky Way galaxy capable of interstellar communication. Radio waves, television waves, whatever the case might be. It's the best known formula for estimating civilizations in the Milky Way galaxy. Do you know what the current answer to the formula is? 10,000. But the 10,000 civilizations in the Milky Way galaxy currently capable of transmitting communication interstellar. But I tell you about Drake's equation because of the last factor in the equation. It's the letter L. And L is a deduct. It's an estimate of the number of civilizations that did not survive their technological infancy. It's part of the formula. They hit their point in humanity's evolution where their power to create and destroy was perhaps greater than their collective human discipline to be humble about the power they created. And so it factors out the civilizations that destroyed themselves. My point with that thought is this shift. I remember when I first got into business many years ago, the prevalent thought was stay in your lane. Keep your head down and think only about lumber and your customers. I really believe in the 21st century, staying in our lanes is a terrible, possibly fatal idea. I do not believe that capitalism can delegate the future of humanity. Who would we delegate it to? Jot that list down. And can we just assume, while we chase lumber around, that humanity's gonna be okay? I don't think that's a safe assumption. So then let's think about humanity at work. How's work going for the people who are doing it? Well, statistically not great. So let's do pre-pandemic. Let's go back to 2019 when we never heard of COVID. In 2019, 160 million Americans worked. Yet only a third of them would say that work was meaningful, rewarding, generative. For 2 out of 3 Americans, it's just an economic exercise, just a paycheck, just benefits, no other value. Globally, the data gets worse. Globally, 3 billion people work, and less than 2 in 10 will describe their work experience as meaningful. In the summer of 2019, 4.5 million Americans were quitting every 30 days. Like the data is self-evident and consistent. I was quite excited last Sunday when the Patriots beat the Lions 27-0. I happened to Google a day later the post-game team-only celebration. Coach Belichick spoke, and he said this and only this: it's all about us, boys. It's only ever about us. I have no interest. Let me make a list of things that do not interest me, and I don't ever think about, and I don't ever talk about, and I don't ever work on. I have no interest in the quote-unquote Great Resignation. I have no interest in whether or not the economy was overstimulated 18 months ago by the federal government. I have no interest in inflation. I have no interest in the story that nobody wants to work anymore. None of that is of any interest to me. The only thing I'm interested in is Hancock Lumber's work culture. That is the only thing I'm interested in. There are 1.7 million people that work in Maine and New Hampshire. We only need 725 of them. I have no interest in that external stuff. I'm only interested in the culture we're creating. So let me talk to you about how I came to feel that way. And this is a little bit of a risk because I spent about an hour on this part of the talk in 2018 when I spoke in Philadelphia at the LBM conference. And I'm going to do this now in about 3 minutes. So you're getting the better end of this. How did I come to feel the way I just talked about? 2 events transformed my view of the world. First, in 2010, at the peak of the housing and mortgage market collapse, I began to have trouble speaking. When I went to talk, all the muscles in my throat would spasm, squeeze, and contract, and it got to the point where I could barely force out a few short words. Turned out I'd acquired a rare neurological voice disorder I'd never heard of with no known cause and no known cure called spasmodic dysphonia that affects only speech. But there I was at the peak of the housing and mortgage market collapse, running a lumber company without a voice. When you can't talk, you quickly identify strategies for doing less of it, and mine was to answer a question with a question, thereby putting the responsibility for speaking back on the other person. Someone would come up to me at work with a question or a problem. Prior to my voice condition, I, Kevin Hancock, the CEO of Hancock Lumber, would have given an answer, an instruction, a directive. But now, to make a long story short, I started simply saying, what do you think we should do? Here's what struck me after hundreds of those conversations. People already knew what to do. They almost never needed a top-down management directive. What did they need then? They needed the encouragement and the confidence and the trust and the safety to follow their own voice. They already knew what to do. Second event, I won't tell you how I got from A to B, but in 2012, because it's too long a story, but in 2012 I began traveling to the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in the southwest corner of South Dakota, about 6.5 hours northeast of right here. Place I've now been over 24 times. The Pine Ridge Indian Reservation is the poorest place in America. I have a friend there who describes their community's journey through modern American history as from first to worst. The lowest life expectancies in the Western Hemisphere are in Haiti. Second is Pine Ridge, South Dakota. The 2 poorest counties in America make up the res. Here's the connection. There I met an entire community that didn't feel heard, that felt as if their authentic, real voice had been pushed to the side. Putting those 2 events together, my own voice and my time at Pine Ridge, I had 5 transformative personal learnings. 1, for the first time in my privileged life, I actually understood what it was like to not feel hurt because I often couldn't say what I actually wanted to say. Second, at Pine Ridge, I was like, wow, there are lots of ways for humans to lose a piece of their voice in this world. That got me thinking about the meaning of life, the stuff I think about at a lumber company in Casco. That got me thinking about the meaning of life. And I said, well, maybe it's to self-actualize. Maybe the one pursuit all humans have in common is we're just here doing the best we can to try to find our own, never to be repeated, authentic voice. There will never, ever be another you across the entire trajectory of human civilization. And that you has an authentic voice that's a combination of everything that's brought you to this moment. And humanity, your gift to humanity is to release it. But then I said to myself, well, how have leaders done historically, helping those beneath them self-actualize? And I concluded that while humanities had some extraordinary leaders, that in total the track record was not good. That for the most part, leaders had used their entitled position to direct, manage, supervise, coach, and exploit the voices of others rather than release them. And that's when it hit me that maybe my own voice condition, which I'd only previously thought of as a liability or quite literally then a pain in the neck, was actually a blessing and a gift and an invitation to lead differently in a way that strengthened the voices of others. And because I had the good fortune of being a CEO, I had the opportunity to not just contemplate this in a college corner professor office, but I had the opportunity to actually try it. So we've been, for 11 years, putting our entire first focus on the employee experience. I remember about a decade ago standing up in a room like this filled with our biggest contractors in Falmouth, Maine, just outside of Portland, and I said to them, you know that old saying, the customer comes first? I don't actually believe that's true anymore. I'm not actually into that. Our sellers in the back of the room were sweating. They're like, where is he going with this? I went on to explain myself. I said, here's what I do believe. I believe if a company were to take world-class experience, world-class care of the people who work there, and the employees as a result were thriving humans at work, that the customer experience would become extraordinary. And the company itself would soar as a cool outcome of a higher calling. I've thought a lot about how to describe the core of the culture we're after. Because it's tricky, right? Who doesn't value the people they work with? Everybody does. But if everybody does, why is engagement 33%? Why are 4.5 million people a month quitting? There's something missing, right? And it's nuanced, but it's so simple that everybody knows how to do it. Here's what we're after. We're after making it safe. Completely safe. Safe for what? Safe to be yourself. Safe to say exactly what you think. Safe to act. Safe to make a decision. Safe to take a chance. Safe to lead. Safe to fail. Safe to learn. That's what we're after. And for that to play out, we, the anointed leaders of the company, had to change. They didn't have to change, we did. And there were lots of ways we needed to change, but one big one was we needed to change the purpose of listening. Before my voice condition, I listened at work to judge whether or not I liked what I was hearing. I didn't know it at the time, and actually, to the extent I did, I thought that's what I was supposed to do. That's why I was the boss. So I didn't think it was particularly negative. But now at Hancock Lumber, listening is for one purpose: understanding. That's the only purpose. In a Hancock huddle, when someone says what they think, here's what you'll hear the facilitator say. Thanks for sharing that. You listen when you go back to work how many times the person with the most power in the huddle either validates what's been said or denigrates what's been said, even if it's polite. And we just stopped doing that. Thanks for sharing that. There are 725 people that work at our company. The company is the collection of 725 individual real experiences. What they're experiencing is truth. So here are some of the outcomes. We've been in this weird science experiment now for 11 years. I want to put a big disclaimer on this. I've been dreading this moment in the talk for months. I have way too much respect for this industry and your companies to want to say anything about our company that is meant to say it's super unique, super cool, or super better. That is not the point of this. We have amazing competitors that we share the marketplace with in Maine and New Hampshire. They're great companies doing great things with great people. I'm only going to share this for the benefit of the ideas, because I believe that any company that made the employee experience its first priority for a decade would transform the employee experience. Companies get whatever they prioritize. Don't ever forget that. They get whatever they prioritize. And if a company's not getting something, it's only because it's not prioritized. So if I may, with that disclaimer, here's our outcomes. And I'm going to skip the lumber market explosion of 2020 through 2022. I'm only going to share data points from 2011 to 2019. Here's what happened to us after a decade of focusing on the employee. One, we became a 9-time best place to work with an engagement score of 90. So the national average is 33%. At Hancock Lumber, we're talking sawmills, truck drivers, load builders, you know the gig. 9 out of 10 of them will say this job is meaningful to my life. 9 out of 10. We all know the answer to this. Line up 2 companies in the same industry, in the same market. One of them has 33% engagement, the other has 90. Who's going to win? Say nothing about who's advancing humanity. Second, everything after number 1 surprised me. Second, our productivity exploded. There was a lot of concern at first. If everyone can say what they want to say, be who they want to be, then what happens to corporate best practices? What happens to discipline? What happens to operating systems? Well, they all got dramatically tighter. My favorite data point is journey value. Do any of you track journey value? Yeah, so we're key metric for us is the average value of what's on a delivery truck when it leaves the gate. From 2011 to 2019, our shipped sales doubled and then almost doubled again, and the number of journeys we made went down. In 2011, we made, I'm going to do this about, 18,500 journeys, and in 2019, on more than double the sales, we made 18,100 journeys. We never bought a truck. I mean, we upgraded trucks, but we didn't expand the fleet. And we had more capacity at the end of the decade on double the sales than we did at the beginning. Here's another one that really surprised me. At first, we started making better decisions. Now that's a bit subjective, but when I look at it, the company started making much better decisions. In the old model, a few of us were making all the decisions, and we got a few of them right and a bunch of them wrong. In the new model, everyone was participating in decisions percolating, and we started making better decisions. My favorite change: by the end of the decade, we were working less and making more. We took the average work week from 48 hours to 40 and pretty dramatically increased the take-home pay. We eliminated overtime. If someone said, what is the worst possible pay system for the 25th century? Go invent it. I would invent overtime. It rewards one thing: how long it takes. It's the only thing it rewards. The longer it takes, the more you make. The longer it takes, the more you make. When really, employees and employers both want the same thing: to figure out how to make it take less time. So we totally reinvented the pay systems, eliminated the overtime. And you say, I love goals where everybody wins. I've done this before. You go to a employee group and say, who here might have any interest in working a little bit less and earning a little bit more? Everybody. But add this up: 8 hours a week times, say you're working 48 weeks, times, say, a 35-year career. That's 13,440 hours across a career given back to the human. And of course, to finish up the outcomes, our company started making a lot more money. It started generating a lot more cash. It started having no debt and growing kind of wherever we wanted to grow on the performance of the team. The company was soaring on the wings of thriving humans at work. Now, real quick, why would this have worked for us? Why might it work for others? I believe there are 3 reasons. The first is natural. You might have heard me tell this story before, but I was standing one night on the Navajo reservation at sunset, contemplating this new leadership model, when 5 words plopped into my head. In nature, power is dispersed. I stopped and had an out loud conversation with the desert. You would have chuckled if you could have seen it. I said to the landscape, I said, where's your corporate headquarters? Where's the command center? I don't get it. Where are all the managers and supervisors and team leads? I turned to a batch of cactus and I said, which one of you is in charge of all the others? And the answer with every question was perfectly clear. The leadership power of nature is actually scattered and diffused. It lives everywhere in its parts and pieces, big and small. And humans who are a part of nature, not separate from it, ultimately aspire to organize in that same way. Reason number 2, humans used to organize that way. You can divide human history in 2 buckets: pre and post agriculture. If you look at how humans lived pre-agriculture, it was shared leadership, dispersed power, respect for all voices. And you look how humans began to organize post-agriculture, that was empire-centric. That was when only a few could be king. Now, to hold that model together, it takes a pile of stories to get people to believe that's how it's supposed to be. And you see them in every religion. You see them in every culture. Take, for example, the fall in the Bible. Man and woman now forever were sinners. And if man and woman forever are sinners, how should they be supervised? The divine right of kings in Europe. That kings, think about this. This was real stuff. That kings took their power directly from God. That kings were an extension of God. Like when you back up and look at that story, it's comical. Those stories had to be woven to sustain power to the center. How would you colonize? How would you enslave? How would you exploit if you couldn't create separation? But here is the coolest point to me. The Sioux and many other indigenous communities knew then what today's most advanced astrophysicists know, which is separateness is actually an illusion. The Sioux call it mitakie oyasin, which means all things are one thing. We're all brothers. The physicists call it the field. The most cutting edge science will tell you today there is a single energy force that makes up the entire universe, and it is present everywhere in all things. Separateness is an illusion. When I leave the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation and go west, I hit the Wyoming border. There's a sign with a cowboy on a bucking bronco in front of the Tetons that says, "Welcome to Wyoming." And I stop. What I love about that part of the country is you just get out of your car, you park right in the road and get out and leave your door open. And I look at that sign and I'm like, is that real? Separateness is an illusion. Where am I going with this with respect to work? In a world where separateness is an illusion, winning is not winning unless everybody's winning. The old model is who can out-negotiate the other, the employee or the employer, the customer or the seller. That's not the new model. The new model is you help the employees soar and the company is lifted on their wings. Let me end with two quotes and a thought. Thanks to my mom, I'm going to put up the second slide. Here's a quote about the old model. This is from one of my dearest friends in life. Her name is Catherine Grayday. She's a Dakota elder who lives in one half of a dilapidated trailer out behind the place where I stay when I go to Pine Ridge. She described her experience in the old model this way. It's just about being worn down, generation after generation. The cavalry, the missionaries, the government, the boarding schools. You wake up one day and it's all been internalized. The oppression takes hold within you and we act out the oppression on ourselves. That's how deeply it's been ingrained. Second quote. This one comes from Lord Varys. Do you know Lord Varys? Game of Thrones, the bald-headed advisor to the kings. Rewatching the first series with my wife. And there's a moment halfway through the first series where Lord Varys says, power resides where women believe it resides. Power resides where men believe it resides. The old model was to convince people power resided beyond you. The new model, which lumber companies can lead, is about reminding people that power dwells within you and running a company in that spirit, which is way easier than running it in the old one. A closing question. What if everybody on earth felt trusted, respected, valued, and heard? What might change? I think everything would change. Where is it ripe for that change to occur? The place of work is the best possible candidate. Capitalism is the best possible candidate because companies can soar on this higher calling. I'm out of time. I so appreciate you having me, and I'll close with the closing they use at Pine Ridge, which is Wopila Tonka, which means big thanks. Thank you.